On my daughter's wedding day, my husband and I saw our photo at the gate with a sign that read, "Keep this couple out." We silently turned around and left. 2 hours later, she realized her wedding had ended the moment we returned home. Greetings, dear listeners. Before I begin telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support our channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. I'm Linda Warren, and I will never forget the moment my heart cracked inside my chest. Cleanly, sharply, without warning, like glass struck by a sudden, precise blow. The morning of my daughter Emily's wedding began with a sense of quiet anticipation. Not joy exactly. That emotion had been complicated lately, but something tender and hopeful. I woke before the alarm, sunlight slipping through the blinds, brushing across the framed pictures on our dresser. One was of Emily at age 6, grinning with 2 front teeth missing, her hair in crooked pigtails I had tied in a rush before school. She had insisted on wearing her glittery princess shoes that day, even though they pinched her toes. "Beauty is pain," she'd said with dramatic flair, copying something she'd heard on TV. Mark and I had laughed until our stomachs hurt. I let myself remember that version of her while I made coffee, small, innocent, needing us. A version she seemed to have shed like a snake's skin as she grew older and more aware of the world's judgments. But today, I wanted to believe we still had a place, parents of the bride, a role that mattered. Mark joined me in the kitchen, fixing his tie with more determination than finesse. He looked handsome in that quiet, steady way he always had, gray at his temples now, deeper lines around his eyes, but the same man who held me through every storm. He nodded toward the small velvet box on the counter, the one holding the necklace we'd saved months to buy. "You sure she'll like it?" he asked. I brushed the lid gently with my fingertips. "She will. She always loved things like this. She pretends she doesn't anymore, but I trailed off." He understood. There was a softness beneath all her new sharp edges. We drove to the vineyard venue early. Heat flooded my face first, embarrassment so sharp it felt like my skin was burning. Then humiliation, deep and sour. And beneath that, disbelief, massive and heavy, pressing down on my chest. Emily. Our Emily. The daughter we raised, protected, fed, clothed, guided, cried over, sacrificed for. She put this here? She allowed this? She wanted this? My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Words felt impossible, too small to hold the magnitude of what I felt. I turned to Mark. His eyes were glassy, not with tears, but with something harder, something wounded and crushed and numbed all at once. I had never seen him look that way, not even when his father died. He swallowed, but no words came. Silence wrapped around us like a shroud. And without even needing to consult one another, we both turned around. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. No scene. Just 2 parents walking away from the wedding of the daughter who no longer wanted them. We reached the car. Mark opened the door for me, his movements mechanical. I sat, clutching the velvet box with the necklace inside, the gift meant to be worn today, the gift meant to symbolize love and continuity. It suddenly felt unbearably heavy. As the engine hummed to life, I stared out the window, the vineyard shrinking behind us, the sign burning itself into my memory. And just like that, without a single word spoken between us, we were gone. During the drive home, Neither of us said anything, not because there was nothing to say, but because every word felt too fragile, too breakable. The silence between us was thick, almost oppressive, the kind that gathers in the lungs and makes breathing feel like an effort. I stared out the passenger side window, watching the vineyard disappear behind us, replaced gradually by winding roads and long stretches of sunlit asphalt. The scenery blurred, not because the car moved quickly, but because my thoughts draped themselves over everything, muting the colors, dulling the world. Yet even in that raw, metallic ache, compassion quietly broke through. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a soft voice whispering in a devastated room. Because no matter how vicious the wound, no matter how cruel the humiliation, I knew my daughter. I knew the way insecurity lived inside her bones like an uninvited tenant, something she never chose but always carried. Emily was the kind of girl who tried too hard, loved too deeply, feared too visibly. She absorbed other people's judgments like blotting paper absorbs ink, staining her sense of self with whatever the world threw at her. From the age of 12, she wanted to be better. Better hair, better clothes, better posture, better skin, better parents. I never let myself consider that last one, but today had forced the thought upon me like a slap. Her fiancé, Brandon, came from the kind of family that acted as though the world existed for their comfort. Everything about them was curated: the tailored suits, the meticulously arranged dinner tables, the conversations polished to a shine. Catherine, his mother, could flick her eyes across a room and in 1 2-second sweep determine who was worth acknowledging and who was not. Emily fell into that world with desperation disguised as elegance. She wanted to belong somewhere she believed she didn't naturally fit. For years I had sensed her pulling away, but gently, subtly, as though she was trying to stretch the distance without snapping the thread between us. She became careful with her words around us, embarrassed when we mispronounced things, self-conscious when Mark wore his old baseball cap to a restaurant. And though she never said it, her eyes sometimes carried the question, why couldn't we be more like them? Maybe she thought we weren't enough. Maybe she felt she had to choose which world she wanted to be part of. Maybe someone pushed her, whispered in her ear, stroked that deep, painful insecurity until it shaped her decisions. A sign like that, he, this couple argued, didn't come from confidence. It came from fear disguised as control. And fear, especially in a young woman who spent years feeling inadequate, can twist itself into cruelty. I rested my hand on Mark's arm. The gesture wasn't dramatic, just a small anchor meant to steady him the way it steadied me. She's lost, honey, I said softly. That's all this is. She's lost. He didn't look at me, but his jaw relaxed slightly. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, pupils tight, the highway reflected in their glossiness. He wasn't a man who cried easily. He came from a generation taught to clench emotion between their molars and swallow it like bitter medicine. But I saw the tremor in his hands as they gripped the steering wheel, saw the way he blinked too often, saw the struggle to keep his voice, his composure, his very dignity intact. He nodded once curtly, as though any larger movement might break him open. He didn't want me to see the tears forming. He didn't know that I already had. The rest of the drive played out beneath a muted sky, the kind that foretells nothing and promises nothing, just exists quietly above the hurt of the world. When we finally pulled into our driveway, the house looked different, though nothing had changed. It felt smaller somehow, emptier, as though the humiliation at the vineyard had followed us home like a shadow that had nowhere else to go. Inside, we placed the necklace, the beautiful, delicate necklace, on the kitchen counter. It rested there, unmoving, the silver chain coiled like a fragile, abandoned thing. I ran my thumb over the velvet box, recalling how Emily's eyes once sparkled at jewelry like this, how she used to marvel at anything fine as though it contained magic. Mark pulled out a chair at the table and sat heavily, exhaling a breath that sounded more like surrender than exhaustion. I joined him across from the necklace, both of us staring at it as though it held answers. Compassion kept us from blaming her. It reminded us that this wasn't born from hate, but from fear, that Emily wasn't trying to destroy us. She was trying to protect a version of herself she thought she had to become. But even that understanding didn't soften the raw edges scraping at my chest. Because compassion doesn't erase pain. It simply forces you to hold both at once, your love for someone and the wound they carved into you. And the pain was unbearable. It settled in the room with us, heavy as a third presence refusing to leave, forcing us to sit with the truth of what our daughter had become, and the truth of how far she had drifted from us. 2 hours passed in a silence so tight it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mark and I didn't speak. We didn't touch the necklace on the counter. We didn't even pour water or make lunch. We simply existed in a quiet fog of hurt, too numb to process anything fully, too overwhelmed to do anything else. Then the phone shattered that fragile stillness. First one rang, then another, different tones, different contacts flashing across the screen. My sister Donna, then my cousin Beth, then a number I didn't recognize. One call after another turned into a relentless stream, buzzes, vibrations, notifications popping up like frantic taps on a window begging us to look. We ignored them. Neither of us had the energy to speak to anyone. The thought of telling the story, of reliving the sign, the whispers, the way we walked away like outcasts, made my chest tighten until breathing hurt. It felt like our humiliation belonged to us alone, something too personal, too fragile, to expose to anyone else's voice. But then Donna stopped calling and sent a message instead. It appeared on the screen like a command with no room for hesitation. Turn on your TV, channel 5, now. I froze, my fingers hovering in the air above the phone. Something in the capital letters, no explanation, no greeting, told me it wasn't a request. It was an alarm. Mark didn't speak. He simply reached for the remote, his movements stiff, precise, as if he were operating under instructions his body understood, even though his mind didn't. The TV blinked on. Static for a second. Then the bright, polished cheerfulness of a local news broadcast, except the atmosphere wasn't cheerful. The anchors wore the kind of strained seriousness usually reserved for scandals or disasters. And then the banner at the bottom of the screen made my blood run cold. Breaking chaos ATVNEIRD quietest of public humiliation. My throat closed. The camera cut to a live shot from the venue. And there it was, Emily's wedding, broadcast lived to the entire state. But it wasn't a celebration. Not in any sense of the word. What played out on the screen was disorder, tension, embarrassment, panic, like the aftermath of a fight no one saw coming. Guests clustered in tight groups, pointing, shouting, recording videos with their phones. A reporter stood to the side, speaking rapidly into a microphone, her hair whipping in the wind, her expression troubled. The groom's family outraged after discovering a sign allegedly placed by the bride, banning her own parents from the ceremony. I flinched, hearing it said aloud, in the cool, detached tone of a professional reporter, made it feel even more cruel, more grotesque. Our private heartbreak turned into statewide spectacle. The camera zoomed in, and there, displayed across televisions in living rooms, break rooms, bars, airports, everywhere, was the sign we had seen with our own eyes. Our photo. The command, "Keep this couple out." Our humiliation made public property. My stomach twisted sharply. I felt sick, dizzy, flooded with a mixture of disbelief and a rising burn that felt dangerously close to anger. The footage cut to the reception area, where the argument was already in full swing. Guests were yelling over one another. Someone live-streamed it from their phone. Judging by the scrolling comments visible at the bottom, the video had already gone viral. And then the camera found Brandon. He paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists, his face flushed, his entire body vibrating with fury. His voice wasn't just raised, it was explosive. "You treated your parents like that. Emily, what is we were wrong with you?" The words punched through me with more force than I expected. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't attacking for sport. He was horrified, morally, viscerally horrified. The camera panned to Emily, my daughter, sobbing, mascara smeared in streaks down her cheeks like dripping ink, hair disheveled, her expensive makeup collapsing under the weight of tears. I didn't mean," Catherine said. Her voice cracked. She reached toward Brandon faintly, timidly, like a child begging for understanding. His mother, Catherine, inserted herself quickly, sharpening the chaos by trying to soothe him with a hand on his shoulder. But Brandon jerked away from her violently. "No, don't touch me. This is too far." The camera zoomed closer. His face contorted with betrayal, disgust. "You lied to me," he shouted. "You said they refused to come. You said they cut you out." My breath stopped. He continued, his voice breaking. "You humiliated your own parents for appearances." I felt my heart collapse again, but now the pain fused with something else, something hotter, stronger, sharper. Anger. Not just at the humiliation at the gate, not just at the sign, not even at the footage now spreading through the internet like wildfire, but at the way Emily had built this disaster herself, brick by brick, lie by lie, insecurity by insecurity, until it toppled in the most public way imaginable. And then the moment that ended everything. Brandon ripped off his ring and hurled it onto the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the microphone. "I'm not marrying someone who can do something this cruel." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman screamed. Emily collapsed, knees hitting the wooden deck so hard I heard it through the speakers. The wedding coordinator rushed in, trying to control the chaos, but it was useless. Too many phones, too many voices, too much humiliation to contain. And live on air, broadcast to thousands, maybe millions. The wedding was canceled. Not whispered. Not delayed. Canceled. 2 hours after we slipped away in silence. Emily's wedding fell apart in the loudest, most spectacular way imaginable. And for the first time that day, something inside me hardened. Not because she hurt us. Not because the state now knew our shame. But because our daughter had destroyed her own future with one cruel decision. And watching it unravel ignited an anger inside me that even my compassion could no longer soften. By evening, The world had transformed into something unrecognizable, louder, sharper, more chaotic than the afternoon broadcast had suggested. The silence in our home had long since dissolved, replaced not by conversation, but by the constant hum of notifications from every device we owned. Our phones vibrated in overlapping waves, a kind of digital pulse that echoed through the kitchen, the hallway, the living room. Each buzz felt like a small tremor, as if the house itself was reacting to the storm unfolding beyond our front door. Videos of the meltdown didn't just circulate, they exploded. Clips from different angles, with different captions, different emotional tones. Some shaky and frantic, others clearer, brutally clear. Reporters had posted edited segments. Guests had uploaded raw footage. Even people who hadn't been at the wedding were making commentary videos, analyzing every expression, every shout, every moment Emily lost control. And then came the hashtags. Hashtag WeddingGate. Hashtag Keep This Couple Out. Hashtag Bride Band's Parents. Each one climbed the trending lists, climbing fast, climbing relentlessly, until they sat at the very top, mocking, gleaming, unstoppable. It felt surreal. Our private pain had mutated into public entertainment, into a national conversation, into something people debated over dinner tables and group chats and workplace break rooms. Millions watched. Millions judged. Millions weighed in with the confidence of people certain they would never make such a mistake themselves. At first, I braced myself for cruelty directed at us. The internet could be merciless, and humiliation often draws spectators who enjoy tearing everyone involved apart. But that wasn't what happened. Not at all. The comments were overwhelmingly, almost unanimously, on our side. People defended us with the kind of passion usually reserved for political arguments or moral crusades. Strangers with usernames I'd never seen poured out empathy, indignation, disbelief. They picked apart the narrative with precision, with fury, with absolute clarity. Any daughter who does that doesn't deserve parents like them. Imagine humiliating the people who raised you. Gross. The groom dodged a nuclear warhead. No wonder the wedding collapsed. Karma struck fast. Emily Warren is officially the villain of the year. I read each comment slowly, my eyes moving across the screen in deliberate, measured strokes. Every sentence landed inside me with a weight I couldn't quite describe. Not joy, not vindication, not anger reaffirmed, but something quieter and strangely stabilizing. For the first time since the morning, I did not feel pain. What I felt was justice, pure, unembellished, unadorned justice. Not revenge. Revenge requires intention. It requires a desire to hurt someone, to retaliate, to wound in return. I had no interest in that. I had no appetite for cruelty. I didn't want Emily to suffer, not in some spiteful, triumphant way. But watching the world react, watching millions recognize the cruelty for what it was, call it out, condemn it, felt like the universe quietly stepping in, placing its hand on the scale and correcting a wrong. Not out of malice. Out of balance. Because Emily had created this storm herself. She built it, brick by brick, lie by lie, insecurity by insecurity. She set the stage. She crafted the sign. She made the choice to push us away, to replace love with image, to trade authenticity for appearance. And when we walked away, silently, without protest, without shouting, without ruining her day, the structure she'd built collapsed under its own weight. But she didn't realize it then. She thought the humiliation was ours alone, that the consequence would fall only on us. She believed we would fade out of sight, quietly absorbing the blow, leaving her free to continue the performance. Instead, the moment we stepped away, something fundamental in the architecture of her wedding cracked. A small fracture at first, invisible to the guests, invisible even to her. But fractures spread. They widen. They search for weak points. And when the world saw what she'd done, when Brandon uncovered the truth in front of everyone, when reporters captured every agonizing second, the fracture became a fault line, and the entire event split open, revealing everything rotten underneath. She destroyed her own ceremony not out of malice, but out of fear. Not out of strength, but out of insecurity. Not because she wanted to hurt us, but because she wanted to protect a version of herself that never truly existed. And the universe, indifferent, patient, precise, simply let the consequences arrive. I sat beside Mark on the couch, the glow of the television lighting his face in flickers of blue and white. His expression was unreadable. Not smug, not satisfied, not vindictive. Just solemn, contemplative, grounded in a truth that needed no embellishment. She did this, he whispered eventually, voice low, almost reverent. All of it. I nodded. Because for the first time, I understood something with absolute clarity. Emily's wedding ended the moment we walked away. The moment she chose appearances over blood. The moment she decided our love was something to hide rather than honor. She didn't realize it then. She didn't see the foundation cracking. She didn't feel the shift beneath her feet. But the world saw. The world judged. The world reacted. And watching that unfold, not with bitterness, but with the quiet acknowledgement of truth, brought a strange, solemn satisfaction. Not cruelty. Not glee. Just the universe finally balancing itself. We had settled into a strange, heavy quiet that evening. The kind of silence that doesn't simply fill a house but settles into its bones. The TV had finally been turned off, our phones silenced, the kitchen lights dimmed. But the emotional weight, grief, disbelief, a muted exhaustion, still clung to the walls like humidity after a storm. So when the doorbell rang, slicing through the stillness with its sharp, jarring sound, both Mark and I froze. It rang again, shorter this time, almost frantic. Mark stood first, exhaling as if bracing himself for an impact. I followed him to the door, each step heavy, deliberate, unsure of what waited on the other side. When he pulled it open, the porch light spilled onto the figure standing there. Emily, still wearing her wedding dress. The hem was torn, stained with dirt and grass. The bodice was wrinkled and sagging, one strap slipping off her shoulder. Her makeup had melted into uneven streaks, leaving her face blotched, haunted. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung limp and tangled, strands plastered to her cheeks. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like a girl who had survived a wreckage. Mom! Her voice cracked on the first syllable. Dad. Before we could respond, she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, swallowed hard, and choked out. Please, I messed up. I messed up so bad. Her breath hitched violently, as though her lungs had forgotten how to hold air. She tried to speak again, but the words splintered, collapsing into shallow sobs. I stepped closer, instinct overriding hesitation. Emily, she shook her head, tears spilling fresh. No, don't be kind. I don't deserve it. Mark's jaw clenched. His arms were crossed, not in anger, but in a painful effort to keep himself together. "We know what happened," he said, voice low but steady. "We saw." The moment he said it, Emily broke. Not softly, not gently, not with the careful dignity she'd always tried to maintain. She collapsed, body folding in on itself, knees buckling, the skirt of her ruined dress pooling around her like deflated tulle wings. A raw, guttural cry tore out of her, the kind that only grief and regret combined can produce. I dropped to my knees without thinking, catching her before she hit the floor. Her fingers dug into my arms, desperate, clinging, shaking so violently, it felt as though she were coming apart. "I ruined everything," she sobbed. "Everything. I just wanted them to think I belonged. I didn't want them to judge me for having simple parents." The last words landed like stones thrown directly at my chest. Not because they were cruel. They weren't. They were honest. Honest in the way confessions are when the soul is cracked open. Mark inhaled sharply, a sound filled with hurt he had held back since morning. "Simple?" he repeated, voice quiet, but trembling at the edges. "Emily, we aren't simple. We're honest. We're loyal. We're parents who love you. And you threw us away to impress strangers." She squeezed her eyes shut, sobbing harder, each breath harsh and uneven. "I know," she cried. "I know. I wasn't thinking. I was scared. I felt so small, like no matter what I did, I'd never fit into their world. Brandon's family made everything look so effortless. Perfect people living perfect lives. And I thought, if I showed them where I really came from, they'd see the truth and push me out." Her voice chattered, so I did the pushing first. The confession hung in the air like smoke, heavy, suffocating, undeniable. I felt something deep within me shift, not forgiveness yet, but something softer than fury, something less rigid than shame, a sad compassion, a mother's ache for a daughter who had twisted herself into knots trying to be someone she was never meant to be. She lifted her face from my shoulder, eyes swollen, gaze pleading. "I am so sorry," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I don't care about them. Not anymore. I just want my mom and dad back." The words hit with unexpected force, both a plea and a surrender. The girl who had pushed us out to protect an illusion was gone. In her place was someone stripped bare, humbled, undone by her own choices. We didn't answer immediately. Mark looked at me first, searching, waiting, struggling with the same conflict swelling inside my own chest. Anger and love, hurt and longing, disappointment and the unshakable instinct to gather her close. Finally, gently, I cupped Emily's cheek, brushing away the messy, wet streak of mascara. "Then rebuild," I whispered, slowly, carefully, truthfully. She nodded, small, trembling, but sincere, like a child accepting a responsibility she wasn't sure she could bear, but desperately wanted to try. Her breathing slowed, her body softened. She rested her forehead against my shoulder, whispering apologies through fractured breaths. And something inside me, something that had been splintered since morning, began to ease. My heart did not fully heal, not yet, but it softened. Her wedding was destroyed. But in the ashes of that destruction, maybe, just maybe, our family still had enough left to rebuild.